He's been called the most dangerous man alive, but now he just wants peace. What would make a man like that take up arms again? Let us know in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe if you believe our veterans deserve more than just a thank you. He was sharpening the blade again. Michael Davis sat at his old workbench, hunched slightly, a whetstone in his left hand and a military-issued combat knife in his right. His hands were steady, methodical. Every pass of steel against stone had purpose, rhythm. It wasn't just about keeping the edge alive. It was memory, discipline, control. The same knife had been with him through Fallujah, Kandahar, Somalia. SEAL Team 6 hadn't issued it, no. He'd earned it. From a friend who didn't make it back. Its weight was just right, still perfect after all these years. Like him. The barn door creaked as Emma peeked her head inside, her voice soft but sarcastic in that way only daughters could manage. You know they sell knives already sharp, right? Michael didn't look up. He grinned faintly. Yeah, but they don't come with soul. She stepped in, brushing her auburn hair behind her ears. Wore that gray hoodie he hated, the one with the California state flag she picked up in some college protest years ago. Emma was 32. Fierce, stubborn, and sharp as broken glass when she was mad. But right now, she just looked tired. You didn't answer my text. I don't like texting, Michael said, sliding the blade into its sheath. You also don't like cell service, the government, gluten, or neighbors. What do you like? He stood, towering over her even with the years rounding his shoulders. You, most days. That earned a soft laugh, one of the few he'd heard from her lately. You've got coyotes near the chicken coop, she added, turning serious. Saw the prints this morning. Michael nodded. They won't try again. She narrowed her eyes. How do you know that? Because I already taught them once. He grabbed his rifle and walked past her like it was just another Tuesday, but something in his gait made Emma frown. In town, folks whispered about the Davis place like it was part myth. Nobody dared cross the fence line. No one really knew what Michael had done during his time in the military. There were stories, wild ones, but the truth was stranger. Michael Davis had led black operations so secret even other SEALs didn't speak of them. He had no official record, no medals on paper, just results, brutal, undeniable results. When he came back 10 years ago and bought up a square mile of land in Idaho, most people figured he was just another PTSD case. But the old-timers, the ones with fading tattoos and quiet eyes, they knew. That land wasn't for farming. It was a fortress. What Emma didn't know, what no one knew, was that Michael had been watching the perimeter cams for days. It started small, a drone hovering too long over the south field, tire tracks where there should be none. Then, yesterday, 3 men in camo gear parked a pickup a half-mile down the ravine and stayed there for hours. No hunting tags, no fishing gear, just watching. Michael Davis didn't believe in coincidence, especially not when it came with accents and silence. The men hadn't come back. Yet. But they would. And when they did, they'd find the soil wasn't just good for growing. It was good for burying, too. Back in the barn, he pulled open a hidden panel beneath the feed sacks. A dull clank echoed as he opened the hatch to the underground vault. Concrete walls, reinforced steel racks, every inch lined with tools of war. Cameras, claymores, custom AR builds, listening devices, tunnels. Emma had no idea. To her, the farm was just a quirky overcorrection, her father's version of retirement. She didn't know about the fail-safe tripwires or the hidden sensors in the trees. She didn't know about the off-grid power grid or the encrypted radios he kept in case the day ever came. He'd spent 10 years building it. The world thought he was done, but Michael Davis had never left the battlefield. 15 miles away, on a dirt trail carved through federal forest land, a black SUV sat motionless. Inside, Diego Rojas, known south of the border as El Fantasma, watched a grainy satellite feed on a custom tablet. He was lean, young, and far too calm for a man responsible for over 200 murders. His cartel, La Sangre de Fuego, had recently expanded its reach through Montana and into rural Idaho, snatching up farmland as staging grounds for airdrops and synthetic distribution. The Davis property was perfect. Elevated, isolated, minimal law enforcement. Rojas chewed a toothpick slowly. "Who is this guy again?" he asked, without looking up. The man in the passenger seat, his tech guy Mateo, scrolled the dossier nervously. "Michael Davis. Records are spotty, no social media. One daughter, no registered weapons besides a few hunting rifles. Retired Navy. That's about it." Rojas glanced over, eyes sharp and unblinking. "That's not about it. That's nothing." Mateo swallowed. "We think he's just a loner. No threat." Rojas smiled faintly. "Everyone's a threat until they're a corpse." The driver, silent until now, adjusted his grip on the steering wheel. "You want us to move in tonight?" "Not yet," Rojas said, tapping his finger against the tablet. "Let's give our friend a little more rope." He leaned back in his seat, the smirk never leaving his lips. "You can always tell how dangerous a man is by how quiet his land is. You listen to the silence if it feels wrong." He turned, eyes glinting. "You burn it." Back at the farmhouse, Michael watched the final feed come in from the east border. Thermal scans picking up heat signatures of rabbits and nothing more. Still, he felt it, the way dogs feel storms before they come. Emma brought in 2 mugs of black coffee. "You ever going to tell me what this place really is?" she asked, half joking. He looked at her for a long time, then gave her the answer she wasn't expecting. 300 miles south, a single-engine plane landed on a makeshift airstrip carved into a wheat field no one farmed anymore. The pilot didn't cut the engine. He kept it idling, fingers twitching on the throttle, eyes flicking from the dusty windshield to the rear view. He wasn't told what was coming, only that it was cargo worth more than his life and less than his soul. The back hatch dropped open, kicking up a halo of dust around the man who stepped out. Tall, polished boots, a pressed black shirt open at the collar, and mirrored sunglasses that never once reflected the sun. He moved with the precision of a man born for kill orders and kingpins. Diego Rojas didn't bother to look at the pilot. He simply nodded to the armed men that flanked him. 5 in total. No insignias, no words, just firepower. By the time the hatch closed, the plane was already lifting off again, vanishing into the haze like it had never existed. Rojas turned to his second, a heavy-set ex-merc named Salazar. "How long to the target zone?" "By truck? 6 hours. We got 3 convoys on the move. Recon says all the locals within 20 miles are either paid off or scared silent." Salazar hesitated, except for one. Royas turned his head. "The old guy." Rojas didn't answer right away. He bent down and picked up a handful of the dry soil, rubbed it between his fingers. It flaked like powder, no resistance, no depth. "You ever dig a grave in soil like this?" he asked. Salazar shook his head. "Do. You don't even need a shovel. You just kick and it gives. The land knows when it's time to let go." He let the dirt fall through his fingers. "I wonder if that old man does." Back in Idaho, Michael sat in silence, watching the security feeds while Emma bustled around the kitchen. She was baking cornbread, something she used to help her decompress after long shifts in the ER. The smell filled the house, mingling with the scent of gun oil and cedar planks. "You ever think about letting it all go?" she asked. He didn't respond. "I mean, seriously, selling the place? Going somewhere with, I don't know, people?" Still nothing. Emma sighed. "You know I worry about you, right? Just because you don't say anything doesn't mean I don't see it. The tension, the eyes always moving, the twitch in your hand when a car backfires." Michael finally looked up. "You brought Noah here." Emma froze. "He's your grandson," she said quietly. "I know. That's why I made the panic room soundproof." Her face dropped. "You didn't." Michael stood, walked past her to the living room, opened the hidden panel behind the bookshelf. Inside, monitors, oxygen tanks, food rations, medical kits. He pressed a switch, and a second chamber clicked open behind the first, small but padded, secure. "Why would you do that?" she asked, voice cracking. "Because they're coming." Emma's lip trembled, but she held his gaze. "How do you know?" "I always know." The truth was, Michael had been feeling the shift for months. Cartel expansion wasn't new. What was new was the pattern. Rural plots going silent. Drones with rotating flight frequencies. Dead coyotes left gutted on his boundary fence. A message, one only a predator would understand. It was all leading somewhere, and that somewhere was here. He picked up his encrypted satellite phone, dialed a number with hands that didn't shake. Not now. The voice on the other end answered with a single word. "Yeah, it's me." A pause. Then a chuckle. "Well, I'll be damned. I thought you were either dead or finally got smart and disappeared. I need eyes, satellites, movement logs, unusual chatter near Long Pine Valley. You think they're coming to you?" Michael's silence was the only answer needed. "I'll call back in 10. Stay breathing." He clicked the phone shut. Emma watched him like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want you here." "Well, too late." He gave her a long look. "Then you better listen." He pulled a sheet from a cabinet and laid it flat on the kitchen table. A topographic map. Hand-drawn overlays, colored thumbtacks placed with strategic precision. "This is where they'll try first, south tree line. It's the least fortified. That's on purpose." Emma blinked. "You want them to come through there?" He nodded. "Because they won't make it past 50 feet. She looked at him, at the scars on his knuckles, the darkness behind his eyes. "What if they don't stop?" Michael walked to the hallway, opened the gun locker with a retinal scan. "Then we don't either." 5 miles outside the property, a pickup truck rolled to a slow stop just past the tree line. 3 men stepped out. They were young, early 20s, but not amateurs. Tactical gear, suppressed weapons, custom boots. One of them pulled out a scope and scanned the terrain. "Looks like a ghost town," he muttered. The leader of the trio, Miguel, spit into the dirt. "That's the idea. He wants us to think it's abandoned, like he's just some old fool with too much land and not enough bullets." "Isn't he?" McGill shook his head. "You don't build fences with motion sensors unless you've got something to protect." They moved forward, slow and deliberate. None of them noticed the micro-drone above, disguised as a dragonfly. Back in the control room, Michael watched. 3 on foot, one's dragging their heel, might be favoring an old fracture, he noted out loud. Emma didn't understand how he saw these things. She saw men, he saw weaknesses, gaps, timelines to death. "You're not going to engage?" she asked. Michael picked up a remote, hit a button. From deep in the woods, a faint whirring sound began. The intruder stopped. "What is that?" Then the sound changed. More like buzzing now. Not bees, machines. All at once, dozens of hidden mini-speakers throughout the tree line activated, whispering. In Spanish. Their names. Where they were born. Their kill counts. Secrets no one should know. Miguel's face drained of color. This is brujeria." Then a voice came, Michael's voice, broadcasted low and clear. "Leave now, or be left here." One turned to run. That's when the first flashbang detonated. No warning, no countdown, just light and pain and dust. They stumbled back, coughing, disoriented. 2 of them dropped their weapons. 1 vomited into the dirt. The final warning came in the form of a red laser dot settling on Miguel's chest. He stared down at it, then up at the trees. And for the first time in his life, he was afraid of silence. When they finally made it back to the pickup, scraped, blinded, ears still ringing. They didn't speak. Not until they were 15 minutes down the road, dust trailing behind them. One of the younger men turned, pale and shaking. What the hell was that place? McGill didn't answer right away. He just stared straight ahead. That, he said finally, was a graveyard pretending to be a farm. Inside the safe house, Emma watched the video playback. The whispers, the psychological warfare, the precision. She turned to her father. "You were never just a soldier, were you?" Michael looked at her. "No," he said. "I was the war." 3 bodies were dragged into the back of a white van just after sunrise. Diego Rojas stood by the tailgate, arms folded, his face unreadable as his men laid the unconscious scouts on the metal floor. 2 of them were breathing, barely. The third, Rojas didn't need a medic to tell him. His neck had snapped when he ran too fast, too panicked, and tripped a tension wire rigged at shin height. Simple, crude, effective. Salazar kicked a rock, watching the blood trail fade into the dust. Booby traps. Drones. Whisper tech. How does a rancher get his hands on this? Rojas didn't answer immediately. He walked to the front of the van, pulled open a case, and extracted a black tactical laptop. Within seconds, encrypted chatter from a private cartel network began scrolling across the screen. He skimmed past most of it until he reached a brief blip, a grainy infrared still of a man's silhouette on the Davis property. Not clear, not high-res, but clear enough to tell it wasn't just anyone. "Reverse match it," he ordered. "Put it against every database we have." Salazar frowned. "Our database doesn't cover military." "Doesn't need to," Rojas replied. "Try Langley, DARPA, Foreign Ops. I don't care if you have to tap Chinese state surveillance. Just find out who this man is." Salazar scratched at his beard, reluctant. "We're poking bears now." Rojas finally turned to face him fully. "No," he said softly. "We're hunting lions." Back at the Davis property, Emma watched her son sleeping in the far corner of the living room, curled up under a quilt on the old recliner. Noah had no idea what had happened the day before. He just knew Grandpa's ranch was loud and exciting and weirdly full of flashing red lights and hidden rooms. At 7 years old, it all felt like an adventure. To Michael and Emma, it felt like borrowed time. Michael stood at the kitchen window, unmoving. His eyes tracked the tree line as if waiting for it to breathe wrong. He hadn't slept. He rarely did when the sky went quiet like this. "You think they'll try again tonight?" Emma asked, voice low. "No," he said. "They'll send more first. Better trained or better paid." He turned from the window. "One of them saw the bunker." Emma's stomach tightened. "The scouts?" Michael nodded. "The one that tripped the wire had a body cam. Small, but I saw the flicker. They'll know this isn't just a prepper's cabin now." She crossed her arms. "Then why not leave? Just take Noah and go?" He looked at her, and something in his face stopped her breath. "Because there are fights you run from," he said, "and there are fights that follow you." He stepped toward the gun safe, opened it with practice speed, and pulled out a suppressed M110 sniper rifle. Next came the rangefinder, the ghillie suit, and the tablet, synced to the property's outer thermal grid. Emma stared as he laid everything out with surgical precision. "What are you doing?" He gave her a grim smile. "Hunting season starts at dawn." By mid-morning, Michael had crawled through 2 miles of waist-high grass and pine scrub, keeping low and off-trail. His boots made no sound. His breath came slow and quiet, every step placed with mathematical care. Most people didn't know that a human's gait echoed at a frequency that tech sensors could detect. Michael had trained himself out of rhythm. He reached the southern ridge overlooking the valley. The grass here was pressed, not from cattle, from men. He scanned through the scope, saw nothing at first, then caught it. A faint flicker of motion behind a downed log, a camera lens disguised as bark. He smiled. "Amateurs." He took the shot, and the camera shattered. Within seconds he heard rustling to the east. Reactives. The cartel had posted watchers, waiting to see who might disable their surveillance. It was bait. and he'd just bitten. He slid down the slope, barely disturbing the foliage, and vanished into the tree line. The first two operatives passed within 12 feet of him and never knew. Their mistake was simple. They didn't look up. Michael dropped from the tree like a ghost, slammed one man into the ground with the force of a freight train, and locked his arm around the second man's throat before a single shout could escape. 2 new weapons acquired, 2 fresh radios, 1 more warning sent. An hour later, back in the safe house, Emma sat across from a laptop with a paused video. It showed her father, just his outline, dropping from the trees, lethal and fast. She couldn't look away. This wasn't the man who taught her to fish or who fixed Noah's bike last summer. This was something else. Someone else. The screen blinked. Incoming message. A new signal traced to somewhere near Sacramento. Masked IP. Military-grade encryption. Only one person used that key. Michael came in and saw the message pop up. Tex, your call woke the dead, brother. I'm on my way. Michael typed back. Reaper, bring fire. 600 miles away, Jesse Tex Dalton tossed his burner phone on the dash of his truck and took the next exit off the interstate. His face was weathered, his Texas Ranger's cap pulled low. He looked like a mechanic or a cattle hauler. But the duffel in his back seat told another story. Full tack gear, comms, suppressors, and a notebook filled with names crossed out in black marker. He had one rule. When Reaper called, you showed up. Back in Idaho, night fell. Michael watched the tree line again. This time, no movement. Too still. Too easy. He switched the feed to infrared. Nothing. But when he flicked on the heartbeat sensor, a prototype from a long-dead Black Ops contractor, he caught something strange. 3 human heartbeats, buried deep. Were underground. Cartels. They were trying to dig in. He pressed the panic code on his tablet. Emma's phone buzzed in her pocket. She knew what it meant. Grab Noah. Go dark. Michael, meanwhile, reached into the secondary storage bunker. Time for the old toys. C4. Detonator cord. Trip sensors. He moved like a man who'd rehearsed this scenario 10,000 times. Because he had. He followed the heartbeat signature to the base of an old cedar stump near the creek bed, scanned the earth, found the breathing pipe, cleverly camouflaged with dried moss. He listened. Spanish, murmured, comms call out. He pulled out a ceramic knife, silent, non-magnetic, perfect. Then he started counting breaths, rhythm, delay, estimate depth. When he hit 30, he slid the blade into the earth beside the pipe and cut a small trench, planted the first C4 charge, stepped back, triggered it. The explosion was dull and low, a perfect underground collapse. Soil convulsed, a plume of steam and dust burst up like a geyser. Silence returned. Then came the cries. Muffled, distant. Michael turned off the detonator. He walked back to the house. When he entered, Emma was holding Noah's hand, a flashlight gripped tight in her other fist. You okay? She asked. Michael nodded. For now. Emma looked at her son, then back at her father. I don't think he knows what's happening. Michael knelt down, looked Noah in the eyes. You remember how you wanted to be a knight? Noah nodded slowly. Well, knights protect castles. They keep the bad guys out. That's what we're doing. You're doing your job just by being brave. Noah gave a sleepy smile. You're the king, right? Michael stood up. No, he said, just the wall. 2 hours later, Tex's pickup rolled down the unmarked dirt road and pulled up behind the barn. He stepped out, looked around once, then said aloud to the air, Nice place you got here, Mike. Shame about the company. The barn door creaked open on its own. Tex didn't flinch, just walked in. Inside, Michael waited by the gear table, eyes calm but sharp. Tex gave a low whistle at the layout. You been busy? Michael nodded. They're not gonna stop. Tex dropped his bag with a grunt. Then, neither are we. The table inside the barn looked more like a war room than anything belonging on a ranch. Laid out in a grid of aerial drone photos, hand-drawn diagrams, and scribbled coordinates, it was clear that nothing on this property had been left to chance. Tex circled the table, his boots echoing off the concrete, his finger tracing the ridgeline along the east sector of the map. "They come through here," he said, tapping the page with the back of a pen. "They'll think it's the weak spot. Steep incline, no direct sight line from the tower, natural dead zone." Michael didn't flinch. "It's a meat grinder. There's tripwire under that shale, shrouded pits, and a couple of bouncing betties. If they hit that line, we light the whole draw." Tex let out a low whistle. "Damn, Reaper, you always did play chess with blood." Michael was checking the action on an M4 when he said, "This isn't chess, it's math. They lose bodies until they can't replace them fast enough. That's when they stop." Tex looked at his old friend, older now, face carved with time and grief, but still solid, still sharp. Still the man who once led a 5-man team into a hostage hellhole and came back with 7 survivors. Michael didn't change. He just learned how to hide in plain sight. "You got comms?" Tex asked. Michael slid over a headset, already synced. "Encrypted, internal frequency, no outside bleed." Tex nodded. "So, what's the plan?" Michael pointed to the map. "Tonight, we don't wait, we bring the fight to them." A beat of silence passed between them. "I like the sound of that." They shook hands, not as a greeting, but as a seal. Old warriors, not returning to the field, but revealing they'd never left it. By nightfall, the sky over Long Pine Valley was veiled in smoke and stars. Out by the creek bed, where the failed tunnel had caved, Rojas and his crew returned, this time with heavy gear and more disciplined muscle. No more green recruits. These were pros, hired mercenaries, ex-special forces from 3 different nations, men whose loyalty came in wire transfers and left in body bags. Rojas stood over the blast site with a clenched jaw. 4 men buried, 1 survived long enough to scream. The man beside him, Victor, tall, pale, and stoic, adjusted his tactical gloves. "This isn't a skirmish," he said in a thick Eastern European accent. "It's a message." Rojas stared at the dirt. "And now it's my turn to answer." He raised his radio. "Launch the drone. Get eyes on the terrain." From a truck bed nearby, a hexacopter whirred to life and lifted into the sky. Its camera swept over tree lines, heat signatures registering in glowing patches. At first it seemed like nothing. Just deer, a few scattered cattle. Then something blinked in the feed. Brief, but deliberate. A flash of light, too rhythmic to be natural. Victor leaned in. Reflection, scope glint. Someone's watching. Rojas smiled. "Let them." Miles away, Michael adjusted his angle atop the overlook ridge. He knew the drone would pick him up. That was the point. Give them something to chase. Distract their eyes from what was coming next. Tex was already in position on the west trail, camouflaged beneath a stack of boulders. He checked his wrist monitor, showed 5 targets advancing up the canyon. They were moving fast, but not recklessly. Controlled. Fluid. This was a serious strike team. Tex smiled to himself. About time they sent someone worth the ammo. At the farmhouse, Emma stayed underground with Noah, who was asleep again, unaware that above him the world teetered between peace and war. She paced the small, safe room, watching the perimeter cams on a split screen. She saw it all. Michael's position on the ridge, Tex's trail choke point, and 2 new figures approaching from the southeast that no one had seen coming. She grabbed the radio. "Dad," she said, "we've got movement, southeast quadrant, 2 heat sigs, moving fast. They're not cartel, they're too clean." Michael keyed his mic. "Copy that." Tex's voice crackled through. "You expecting friends, Mike?" Michael frowned. "Not anymore." But a moment later, the IDs pinged through the recognition software. Michael's eyes widened slightly. "They'll be damned," he muttered. The system displayed 2 names, Special Agent Monica Reyes and Daniel Quinn, both flagged as federal assets, both carrying enough firepower to outfit a SWAT team. They weren't intruding. They were here to help. Michael flipped to an open channel. "Reyes, that you?" A second of static. Then, "Heard you were throwing a reunion. Thought I'd crash the party." Michael grinned briefly. "Hope you brought fireworks." Reyes's voice cut sharp and clear. "We got drones, intercept capability, and authorization to make sure this mess doesn't spill past the tree line, but off the record, we're not here." "Understood." Michael turned to the east cam, where Reyes and Quinn now flanked the far entrance to the property. This changed everything. With federal eyes watching, the cartel couldn't just erase the mess. They'd have to go loud. Or go home. But Rojas didn't do retreat. He did statements. At 2:14, the first real assault began. It started with a sound. Low. Deep. Not mechanical, but alive. A roar. Then headlights. 2 trucks screamed up the ravine, reinforced with armor plating, and armed men leaning out the windows with automatic rifles. Behind them, a third vehicle, an old military Humvee, lurched forward with a mounted grenade launcher. Michael radioed one word: "Now." Tex popped up from his rocky hide and fired a single round. The lead truck's tire exploded, flipping the vehicle sideways into a tree. Metal screamed. Men flew. The second truck swerved, clipped the wreck, and lost control, spinning out into the mud, where a mine waited beneath the surface. It detonated with a crack that shook the valley. Fire bloomed. Smoke swallowed the tree line. The Humvee kept coming, until Michael dropped to one knee, aimed, and fired. The round punched through the engine block, sparking a chain reaction. It didn't explode immediately, but it burned, and in that fire the silhouettes of men fleeing became targets in retreat. Michael called in. "Tex? Still breathing. Might need a new shoulder after this." "Reyes?" Her voice came back tense. "They've got reinforcements pushing from the south. 3 more units. We're holding for now." Michael looked at the map. That path led straight past the family orchard. And the pond beyond it. He smiled. "I've got an idea." He sprinted from the overlook, feet barely touching the earth, heart hammering but precise. At the orchard, he knelt beside a plastic cover embedded in the ground. Pulled it open. Inside, 3 canisters of CS gas linked to a timed release. He'd rigged it years ago in case wildfires ever pushed animals into the house zone. But now it would serve a better purpose. He activated the timer, covered the hatch, and moved fast, over the ridge, back to the tree line. Where he waited. When the reinforcements breached the orchard, the air shifted. One man gagged. Another dropped to his knees. The CS gas was thick, burning, disorienting. Perfect. Michael fired twice. Reyes flanked left and dropped another. The rest fled, not because they were ordered to, but because even mercenaries knew when they were outclassed. By 3:27, the ground went quiet again. Bodies littered the field. Weapons were scattered, radios dead. Michael stood over one of the downed cartel lieutenants. The man blinked up at him, bleeding from his thigh, his weapon just out of reach. Michael knelt. "Tell Rojas," he said quietly, "he doesn't own this land." Then, with cold clarity, "And he won't survive trying." Daylight broke through the smoky haze like a slow knife carving through muscle. The valley was quiet, but it wasn't peace. It was aftermath. Charred remains of trucks littered the ravine. Blood streaked the gravel. Buzzards circled lazily overhead, drawn by the scent of burning oil and wounded pride. Michael stood on the farmhouse porch, cleaning his rifle, not because it needed it, but because idle hands were a luxury he'd never learned to afford. His gloves were soaked through, boots mud-caked, eyes bloodshot. He hadn't slept in 40 hours. Tex emerged from the barn with his right arm in a sling and a strip of duct tape holding a butterfly stitch over his eyebrow. "You ever think," Tex muttered, sitting on the porch steps, "maybe we're getting too old for this?" Michael didn't look up. Only when I stop winning. Tex grunted. Hell of a night. Michael finally set the rifle down. That wasn't the fight. Tex raised an eyebrow. Could have fooled me. They haven't sent Rojas yet, Michael said, his tone cutting clean as a blade. That was just his forearm, the elbow, not the fist. Inside, Emma knelt next to Noah, who was brushing crumbs off his Batman pajamas and playing with a plastic helicopter. He hadn't asked about the noise, hadn't cried. He just kept looking at the ceiling like he knew monsters were real, but also knew they couldn't break through the walls his grandfather had built. Emma stood, checking the monitors again. Reyes had posted 2 federal drones in orbit and promised a blackout on any official report, her way of thanking Michael for saving her life back in Basra 10 years ago. She didn't owe him, but she remembered. The silence outside was deceptive. On screen, movement was already stirring 5 miles out. Not big. Just a couple of scouts, moving slow, observing, learning. They wouldn't be the only ones. Michael entered the room. We've got 12 hours, maybe less. Emma didn't need to ask. He's coming, isn't he? Michael nodded. The man who sent all this? He doesn't like losing, and he doesn't retreat. She crossed her arms. Then why wait? Why not hit us again last night? Because Rojas doesn't rage, Michael said. He plans, he studies, he recalibrates. Emma stared at the screen, watching a heat signature disappear behind the ridge. What does he want? Michael leaned in. Control, terror, territory, and fear. She looked at him, eyes sharp. And what are we going to give him? Michael's jaw clenched. Exactly none of that. Down in a canyon a few ridges away, Rojas sat in a folding chair beneath a camo tarp, studying heat maps and drone feeds. His shirt was soaked through with sweat, but his movements remained calm, deliberate. A pack of mercenaries stood behind him, waiting for orders. Victor leaned over the table. The girl is still inside. No additional exit signals. Same with the child. Rojas kept his eyes on the thermal overlay. He hasn't moved her. Why not? Rojas didn't answer at first. He just tapped a spot on the map where the farmhouse sat, highlighted in red. Because he's setting a trap. Then why go in at all? Victor asked. We've lost 9. Burned equipment. 2 squads neutralized. Rojas finally looked up. Because if we walk away now, everyone else thinks it's possible to stop us. He stood. If we don't finish this, we don't exist anymore. He nodded to one of his men who opened a crate and removed a tablet. Rojas touched a few keys. A live satellite view of the property came into focus, provided by a corrupted node they'd hijacked off a private aerospace company 3 weeks ago. We go in from the north. Aerial drop, silent. 4 teams, synchronized breach. And the minefield? Victor asked. Let Reaper have his teeth, Rojas said coldly. We'll take his throat. Back at the house, Tex was going over inventory. Blaymore's check, drone jammers check, perimeter's still live. He lifted a small drone from its case and handed it to Michael. Didn't think I'd be flying toys again, he muttered. Michael nodded, placing it into his field pack. Today's not about survival. It's about statement. Emma entered, strapping a sidearm to her belt. You said if we stood, it had to mean something, so how do we make it mean something? Michael gestured to the table. We turn this place into a scar they'll never forget. He pressed a few buttons. Lights on the property lit up in a cascading sequence, each one revealing a hidden trench, a disguised pitfall, or an underground pressure plate. This land's not a home. It's a lesson. He looked at her. They'll come to take. We'll make sure they leave with nothing. Rhea's voice cracked through the comm line. Got chatter. Encrypted, tight band. They're airborne. I count at least 1 Black Hawk, maybe 2 modified birds, no lights. ATA 22 minutes. Michael's tone didn't change. Let 'em come. He pulled a weathered notebook from his coat pocket and flipped to a marked page. Inside, sketches of traps, perimeter lines, breach scenarios. All tested, all proven. All final. The clock ticked down. 15 minutes. Tex took position by the western wall, rifle balanced on a sandbag. Emma crouched behind the armored cellar doors, pistol in hand, radio in her ear. Michael walked to the front steps, cradling the old combat knife in his palm. He looked out over the land he'd tamed with his own 2 hands. He closed his eyes and waited. The first Black Hawk came in low, running dark. Too low. Tex's drone picked it up before it even crossed the fence line. Michael activated the disruptor, an EMP burst that knocked its nav system offline. The helicopter lurched, banked right, clipped the edge of a tree, and went spinning into the dirt with a thunderous crash. No time to cheer. Another group fast roped in from the second chopper, 12 men, perfectly spaced. But they dropped right onto Zone Delta. The mines triggered in sequence. First 1 leg, then 2, then screams echoing into the pine trees like some kind of ancient god crying vengeance. Michael was already moving through the smoke, sliding between trees, firing clean, tight shots, head, chest, kneecap, not just to kill, but to demoralize, to destroy belief. Reyes flanked from the ridge with Quinn, providing cover fire. Every bullet found flesh. Every step was earned in pain. Inside the house, Emma watched the monitors. Saw one blip get too close. She didn't hesitate. When the door burst open, she fired twice. The man hit the floor without a word. And then it happened. The moment everything turned. Rojas himself stepped into the yard. No mask, no squaw. Just a suppressed pistol and a calm expression. Michael saw him from 20 yards out, both of them moving with the same cold grace. Michael didn't fire. Rojas didn't flinch. They just stared. 2 killers, 2 men who didn't believe in mistakes, only outcomes. Then Rojas said, quietly, "You can't win this." Michael replied, just as calm, "You already lost." Rojas raised his weapon, but Michael was faster. 1 shot, right between the eyes. No final words, no theatrics, just silence, and 1 more body for the earth to keep. Tex radioed in from behind a burnt-out stump. "Is it over?" Michael stood above Rojas's body. "For them?" Then, more quietly, "But now it begins for us." The morning after smelled like scorched pine, iron, and diesel. Smoke curled gently above the tree line, rising in thin, silent threads as the wind blew through what was left of the forest's edge. The ground bore scars, craters, bloodstains, cracked earth. A blackened rotor blade lay embedded like a broken wing in the mud. But the farmhouse still stood. Tex sat on an overturned feed bucket outside the barn, chewing a toothpick and watching the horizon like it owed him something. His sling was gone and his shoulder wrapped in tight gauze, but the man refused to slow down. He tilted his head slightly as Michael walked past, boots kicking loose gravel from the dirt path. "Well," Tex muttered, "looks like you still know how to throw a hell of a barbecue." Michael gave a faint, tired smirk. "It didn't have any ribs, just a surplus of intruders." They said nothing for a while after that, just listened to the breeze. A few birds had come back already, brave little things, singing from burned branches like the world hadn't tried to end the night before. Emma stepped out onto the porch, Noah perched on her hip, his arms looped loosely around her neck. He looked sleepy, content. There were jam smudges on his cheek and mismatched socks on his feet. Michael looked at them like a man watching everything that ever mattered, all in one fragile frame. "You both okay?" he asked. Emma nodded. "We are now." Noah lifted a hand and waved. "Hi, Grandpa." Michael smiled back. "Hey there, cowboy." He turned to Tex, his face growing serious. "We need to clean the rest of it up before the feds sweep the area. Bodies, shells, whatever tech we don't want photographed." Tex stood, stretching with a wince. Already started. Reyes is bringing in a ghost team tonight to sanitize. She's calling it an unsanctioned joint training exercise. Michael nodded once. She also said the agency's backing off. Apparently, when a known cartel head dies on American soil with 0 witnesses and no digital footprint, the paperwork writes itself. Michael's jaw tightened slightly. And the cartel? Tex's eyes narrowed. Leaders gone. Their best squads are ashes. The rest will scatter, maybe lick their wounds and regroup somewhere softer. Not here. No, Tex said, not here. Inside the farmhouse, the table had been cleared of weaponry and maps. A plate of scrambled eggs and toast now sat there, half-eaten. Emma had replaced the batteries in the old radio, and a soft country song played faintly from the corner shelf. It wasn't loud, but it filled the house in a way silence never could. Noah scribbled on a piece of paper with broken crayons. He'd drawn a stick figure in a big hat standing in front of a square house. 2 other stick figures held hands next to it. One had a crayon mustache. One had what looked like a badge. "That's Grandpa," Noah said proudly, pointing to the tall one. Emma knelt down beside him. "And who's that next to him?" Noah paused, tapping his chin with exaggerated thought. "That's me. And that's Tex. He said I could be his deputy." Emma chuckled. "Did he now?" "Yeah, he said I was tough, like real tough. He let me hold his hat." Outside, Reyes approached from the dirt road, flanked by 2 men in plain clothes and dark glasses. She was dressed differently now, civilian jacket, jeans, hair pulled back into a tight ponytail. No badge, no vest, just the weight of truth in her stride. Michael met her halfway down the path. "Clean?" she asked. "Clean enough," he said. "You bring shovels or lawyers?" Reyes gave a tired smile. "Neither. Just a file and a question." She handed him a folder, thin but dense. Inside, satellite images, tactical maps, intercepted cartel transmissions, evidence of coordinated operations spanning 4 states. "You want to make this place more than just a fortress?" she asked. Michael glanced at the file, then back at her. "I'm listening." Reyes stepped closer, voice low. "We make it a training site, private, off-grid, fully deniable. We vet who comes in, only those who need it, veterans, survivors, the kinds of people the world forgets until it needs them again." Michael didn't respond right away. His fingers tapped the folder's edge slowly. "And the feds? They'll look the other way," she said. "Too many other fires to put out. Too much mess to trace back here. You keep it clean, it stays invisible." He turned to look at the farmhouse, at Emma, laughing as Noah showed Tex his crayon drawing, at the land scarred, but still holding strong. "You really think this place can be something more?" "I think it already is," Rez replied. "We're just giving it a name." Michael stared at the sky for a long second, then nodded. "Then we make it official?" Reyes offered a hand. He took it. In the days that followed, the Davis property changed, subtly at first. The satellite array got new wiring, the barn's foundation was reinforced and retrofitted. What looked like ordinary ranch fencing was embedded with directional microphones and pressure plates. A separate building went up near the east pasture, labeled only as Range A. No one talked much about what went on there. But word spread, quietly among certain circles. If you needed to disappear, if you needed to heal, if you needed to learn how to fight back, there was a place, and at the center of it was a man with gray in his beard, scars on his hands, and eyes that had seen more than any man should. Michael Davis. They called him Reaper in stories. In person they called him Sir. One night, weeks later, Emma stood on the porch sipping sweet tea while Noah dozed beside her in a hammock. The stars were out, more of them than she'd seen in years. It felt like the land had exhaled, like the dirt itself was grateful. Michael joined her, resting one hand on the railing. "He's sleeping good these days," she said. "He's safe," Michael replied. They stood there for a while, watching the night breathe. Then Emma said, "You ever wonder why it had to be you?" Michael's eyes didn't leave the sky. She turned to him, confused. "It didn't have to be me," he said. "It just couldn't be nobody." She smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "You're still the quietest man I know." He gave a soft chuckle. "And you're still the loudest reason I stayed alive." Later, as the crickets took over the silence and the world settled into peace again, a wooden sign was hammered into the front gate. It didn't have a name or coordinates, just 5 words burned into the grain. "You were warned. Stay out." Michael watched from the porch, then turned inside, locking the door behind him. The lights dimmed. The land rested. And far beyond, where cartels whispered of ghosts and mercenaries spoke of nightmares in the hills, the name Davis became legend. Not because he wanted war, but because he made sure no one brought it here again.